Picture this. It's the morning of May 29th, 1453, and the air is just thick with smoke, dust, and the shouts of thousands of men. Suddenly, a deafening roar of artillery completely shatters the morning silence. For literally over 1,000 years, the massive towering walls of Constantinople were the ultimate shield of the ancient world. I mean, they were the absolute gold standard for an impenetrable defense. But on this single, incredibly explosive day, the unthinkable happened. The ancient world's strongest walls finally gave way.
It really makes you stop and wonder, right? How exactly does an ultimate fortress, one that stood totally invincible for centuries and defied empire after empire, suddenly get reduced to rubble in a single decisive moment? This wasn't just some run-of-the-mill battle. This was a spectacular, catastrophic breach that permanently shifted the global map. So, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover the dramatic military strategies that brought down an empire.
Section 1. The unbreakable ancient walls. To really wrap our heads around the magnitude of this collapse, we first have to understand the awe-inspiring scale of these defenses. Just like Rome, the ancient city of Constantinople, which was established way back around 330 AD, was built upon 7 distinct hills. This wasn't just some flat city hiding behind a basic wall. Oh no, it was a towering, multi-layered geographic fortress. Any approaching army was forced to stare up at this incredibly intimidating, heavily fortified high ground that practically dared them to try and attack. And geography gave them the ultimate home field advantage. The city sat perfectly at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, flanked by the highly strategic waterways of the Bosphorus Strait and the Golden Horn Inlet. This naturally created a lethal choke point. Any approaching navy was forced into these really tight, highly defensive waters, where the city's defenders had the absolute upper hand. Actually, they would often block off the Golden Horn entirely with this massive floating iron chain. You really couldn't get past it.
Section 2. Centuries of failed sieges.
Thanks to that brilliant combination of high walls and water choke points, the city survived wave after wave of invaders for centuries. We're talking Arab forces launching massive sieges starting around 671 AD. Then the Bulgars brought their armies in 755 AD. The fierce Normans traveled from afar to try their luck in 866. And again, the walls held. The attackers were met with absolutely devastating counterattacks, sometimes involving these terrifying, unquenchable naval weapons like Greek fire, and they were either completely repelled or they perished.
Get a load of this statistic. Throughout its long history, leading up to 1453, the city was besieged a staggering 29 times, but it was only conquered 7 times, and almost never by brute force from an outside power looking to dismantle the empire. Before 1453, the idea of a permanent, catastrophic military breach of those walls, it was considered practically impossible, a complete fantasy.
Section 3. A young sultan's vision.
But, the world outside those walls was evolving rapidly. This whole situation became this fascinating clash of eras. On one hand, you had the declining remnants of the ancient Roman Empire. It had become kind of static, aging, and heavily reliant on the past glory of its walls. On the other hand, you had the rising Ottoman military machine, fueled by the relentless ambition of a young Sultan Mehmed II. The Ottomans were bringing a highly organized, dynamic, and modern kinetic offense to the table, and the ancient world simply did not have an answer for it.
Section 4. The Janissary military machine. To really grasp why the Ottomans succeeded where literally everyone else failed, we have to look at their legendary elite infantry, the Janissaries. The name literally translates to the new army, and they were established decades earlier, back in 1362, by Sultan Murad I. They were designed to serve directly under the Sultan as his personal guard. In an era where most European armies just relied on temporary, scattered feudal levies, the Janissaries were a highly specialized corps. Basically, they were one of Europe's first modern standing armies, created from the ground up to be the ultimate weapon. So, how do you build a force that incredibly effective? Well, first, they were recruited in their youth, completely removing them from their past lives to ensure absolute, undivided loyalty to the Sultan. Second, they went through this rigorous, continuous training in strict military discipline, combat mastery, and faith. They were raised to know absolutely nothing but warfare, which forged this incredibly tight psychological brotherhood. The result? A totally unstoppable force on the battlefield. They were widely considered the absolute most feared and skilled warriors of their era.
Section 5. 1453. The Spectacular Breach.
Which brings us squarely back to the spring of 1453.
This is where the immovable object finally met the unstoppable force. This breach wasn't just a stroke of luck, it was an absolute masterclass in overwhelming strategy and ingenuity. First, Sultan Mehmet II brought in massive, newly developed super cannons. We're talking cannons so large that one of them literally required hundreds of oxen just to move it. They fired these impossibly heavy projectiles that physically battered the ancient stone day and night. The sheer roar and kinetic power shattered the illusion of the city's invincibility. Second, the Ottomans executed these brilliant naval maneuvers. In a stroke of absolute tactical genius, they actually rolled their ships over land on greased logs to completely bypass that massive iron chain blocking the Golden Horn. Crazy, right? This allowed them to attack directly from the water. And finally, relentless, perfectly coordinated ground assaults led by those elite janissaries simply overwhelmed the exhausted defenders. The end of a great ancient empire and the founding of a new one. When the dust finally settled on May 29th, the outcome literally changed human history. The breach marked the definitive end of a great ancient empire that had lasted for over 1,000 years, and the triumphant founding of a new one under the Sultan. In a single moment, the geopolitical map of the world was instantly and permanently redrawn.
Section 6. Secrets in the Rubble.
Now, our story doesn't just end with military destruction, because while the mighty defenses fell, true magnificence actually survived. Take the legendary Hagia Sophia, rebuilt centuries earlier by the Emperor Justinian, using over 10,000 workers and featuring a staggering 170 columns of beautiful marble. It somehow survived this brutal siege. Instead of being destroyed, it was preserved, revered, and transformed to serve a brand new era. It stood tall, right there amidst the ashes of the old empire. Which leaves us with a truly compelling mystery to ponder. We know the greatest walls of the ancient world were shattered by supercannons. We know the Hagia Sophia survived the spectacular transition of 1453. But what other hidden architectural secrets, underground networks, and legendary monuments were left behind in the ashes of this conquered city? What else survived the siege? Well, that is exactly what we're going to explore in our next explainer. You absolutely won't want to miss it.